Hey, everybody. We are live on Facebook for lunch, and I am super excited about this conversation because I think it's a necessary one that we need to have, especially because, stories just to continue to pop up. But Harvey Weinstein has been in the news, the controversy. Everyone has been talking about sexual harassment on the job or in line with your profession. And then just yesterday, former President Bush apologized for patting a woman on her behind. And so it just continues to come out. We've had the hashtag Me Too that I saw is close to 20 million people supporting. So this is a real issue that we need to discuss. And so I'm so glad that you're tuned in today, and I hope that you will join the conversation. I have had to pull in the expert because I am certainly not the one that is the expert on this subject. Her name is Natasha Bowman, and she is an attorney. She is an author, and her book is called You Can't Do That at Work. And so I talked to her a couple of days ago on the Al Rucker show where I do a segment, but I really wanted to go in depth, and I especially wanted to talk about the nuances when you happen to be an entrepreneur. So please welcome into the show, Natasha. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. Hi, everyone.
So I saw the headline for President Bush. Did you grasp that story?
I did. And, all I can do is sigh because we're going to see familiar names come out probably on a daily basis right now. Former President Bush did apologize. He did not dispute the allegations. And probably to him, it was a term of endearment, just the way that it was described. I don't think he had an intent to harass or violate anyone. He was very apologetic, but that's the key there, because harassment is not about your intent. It's about the perception of the person that's being harassed. So
absolutely.
So I think that was one of those instances. I'm not jumping to conclusions, and I'm definitely not trying to minimize the person who felt that they were violated. But, again, I think an example is we see in the workplace, term of endearment, pat on the butt, I'm going to come and give you that hug, even though you're awkwardly, don't want to hug me back. Or I'm going to tell you look pretty every single day or compliment you every day. That's all harassment. And we're going to continue, I think, to see different forms and shapes of harassment come out as women are now finally feeling empowered to tell their story, like that Me Too hashtag you spoke about.
Absolutely. And I really want to talk about some of the more subtle, because I've learned a lot about this whole sexual harassment and the subtleties of it that a lot of us experience on a daily basis. But tell me we've had Roger Ailes, we've had Bill O'Reilly, now President George Bush. We've had the senior, not the junior. Let's be clear. Senior, not the junior.
But Daddy Bush is not coming.
And then Harvey Weinstein. What do you kind of see as the similarity? Is it because they're in power?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Harassment, especially sexual harassment, is all about power.
Okay.
You are in these high valued positions, from the President of the United States to the president of a news company, to the president of a movie company, and you feel as if you have power, and you feel as if laws and policies just simply don't apply to you. And the message that these people have been receiving is that, it doesn't apply to you, because as we saw in many of those cases, with the exception of former President Bush, is that this happened over many times. It was a pervasive, and organizations were paying their victims to go away. And I like to try to say the strategy against this has been take the pay and go away. And oh, by the way, I'm proud, since we spoke, there's been 2 legislators in New York that has introduced legislation in the state of New York to say non-disclosure agreements for workplace harassment should be illegal. That is a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Very good.
Active, where they're avoiding, all previous non-disclosure agreements. Mm-hmm. Hey, organizations better dust off that investigation book, and they better make things right.
So, hey, Chanel, thanks for joining in. Hey, Ward. Hey, Carolyn. Doug pointed out that I said grasp that story. So I guess he thought that was a kind of funny play on words. Thank you for that, Doug. Thank you guys for joining. If you guys have any questions about, this story or any kind of form of sexual harassment, feel free to jump in while we have Natasha here with us. But I do want to talk about why. I mean, we talked about power, and I certainly get it. But what other reasons do you think keep women from sharing their story or talking to somebody at work, HR department, that sort of thing?
Right. Well, number one, I think they feel embarrassed. I think there's a stigma around, did I ask for it? Was it the way that I dressed? Was it something that I said? I think that's one reason. Another reason is just fear of retaliation. Again, the common theme between these men, these are the men in power. These are the men that essentially could hold your profession in their hands. And a lot of the stories that were told, especially with the Harvey Weinstein situation, was that he would say, oh, I thought you wanted a role in this movie, so are you sure you don't want to engage in this? So you feel like you're going to be retaliated against, and you feel like you will essentially just be blacklisted from your industry. So you feel helpless, and you don't feel like you have a voice, and you feel powerless. So you accept the behavior as it is, and you think that it's a cost of admission for being at your job and being in your career.
Now, and like you said, I'm glad that the hashtag #MeToo is really encouraging people, even years, decades later, to share their story. I know I talked about about a situation where, I was at work and it was clearly sexual harassment. It was extremely inappropriate, and it was in front of a group of people. So it wasn't, my word against his. I mean, everybody was appalled. And I went to the HR department, and I just broached the subject. Like, if I was in this situation, what would the result of it be? Like, what would be the process? And it was a woman. She was head of the HR department, and she told me, she was like, you better be sure, because you could lose your job. And because of that, I had a family to support. I mean, it just was not, there was nothing that made me even feel even remotely safe in starting to pursue the process. What is that process like? Say that something happens and you go to the HR department. I'm assuming that's where you should start.
That's where you should start. You should go to the HR department. Well, first of all, you should start by telling the aggressor. Now, assuming it hasn't risen to the level of a Harvey Weinstein where you have been sexually assaulted, So someone is asking you consistently out for a date. Someone is making comments about your body. That kind of subtle sexual harassment. The first thing you should do is tell that person to stop. Tell them that their conduct isn't welcomed. If they continue, or if you just don't feel like you can tell them that, let's say it is your manager or someone high up, then go to your HR department and report the behavior. But the key here, and I think this is where all women kind of get lost, is if that HR department never comes back to you, and closes the loop with you to say, hey, I spoke with this person, they shouldn't engage in this behavior again. If they do, come back to me. Or if they offer you that settlement agreement that, hey, yeah, we corroborated your claims, but, we'd rather have him than you, then don't sign that agreement, especially not without consulting an attorney first. You need to consult your attorney, because if they're going to pay you to close your mouth, you need to make sure that you are compensated for quite a while. You need to make sure you're not going to be blacklisted from the industry.
Right.
But you do have other avenues outside of HR. Number one, you can still go to the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or your state civil rights agency. You can go see an attorney. And if that behavior does result in sexual assault, meaning if you are being touched in some way, if you were touched some way, go to the police department. Don't wait for your organization to take action.
Okay, so I want to stop there, and we're getting a lot of comments about, these situations in comparison to Bill Cosby and what happened. So I just want to be very clear about this. So when you say sexual harassment, and I want to make two distinctions.
Yep.
When you say sexual harassment, that is different from sexual assault, because it's words and it's not necessarily some kind of physical touch. Okay, I want to be clear about that. Mm-hmm. The second thing, Pamela, hey Pooh, how are you? Pamela made a comment. I want to talk about that too in just a second. The second distinction I want to make is if somebody makes a comment to you, or somebody is constantly asking you out or giving you, attention that is unwanted. If you do not say to them, this is not wanted, this is not acceptable, you're making me feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. If you don't say that, is it then not considered sexual harassment?
So it's still considered sexual harassment. It's
Okay.
still considered, but the thing about it is, if you were to go to court, if you would go straight to an attorney's office after you've been harassed and you file, and you and your attorney decide to file a lawsuit, your organization's defense to that lawsuit could be, we never knew about the conduct. You didn't give us an opportunity to stop the conduct. So that's why it's very important that you take that step-by-step measure, because you don't want your suit thrown out in court. So they have a legal defense to say, yeah, maybe this took place, but they didn't give us an opportunity to reach. She didn't give us an opportunity to respond.
Correct. Okay, so Sylvanas, I think that everybody's clear that HR normally works hand in hand with the head of the corporation. I mean, they're part of management. So I'm not sure if you're implying that it's like some kind of conspiracy, but it's
not a conspiracy, but HR is there to protect the interests of the organization.
Absolutely, which is why you get your own outside attorney. And let me scroll back down to this comment, because this happened to me as well, and not just from men. But Pamela says, I was pregnant and had to deal with this attorney always touching me, rubbing my back, shoulders, and wanting to feel my baby move. And so he said it was a part of admiring. And I think that a lot of pregnant women have to deal with this. I think that people just assume that it's okay to touch your stomach.
I've been through that too. And I simply will say, especially if I don't know you, you come and you touch me, I simply just say, look, if you don't mind, I don't like to be touched, and leave it at that. And most people in those instances, they get it. That's not necessarily harassment. That's more, I just want to feel your belly. But it is always okay as a woman or a man to tell someone, I don't like for my space to be invaded. Don't touch me. I have that problem walking through the mall. The people that sell stuff at the kiosk in the mall, they just walk up to you trying to lotion on you.
Right.
I always don't touch me. I always make it very clear, do not touch me. So you always have the right, whether it's in a sexual harassment. And again, and I can't emphasize this enough, that when it comes to sexual harassment, it is not about your intent. It is about the perception of the person that's being harassed. So for all intents and purposes, you might just want to touch somebody's belly, or you might think, oh, it's okay to tap a butt or rub the back, but it's my perception if I don't want my body. So it's just best not to touch anyone, in the workplace, especially in the workplace.
Right. And so I think that the big difference with Bill Cosby and a lot of these situations, and not necessarily Harvey Weinstein, because now we're getting even more allegations about assault and rape and that sort of thing. But Bill Cosby, it wasn't just sexual harassment. I mean, he was always accused of rape and assault. And so those are really two different things.
It was, and I get that question a lot. What's the difference? And there are some similarities. They were men of power. Women did go with them thinking, oh, if I have a good relationship with them, they can get me in the industry. But there's, there are two distinguishing points. Number one, like you just said, with it, both of them, allegedly involved rape at some point or sexual assault. But Harvey Weinstein more so acted on behalf of his employer during most of these encounters. He was acting on behalf of the Weinstein Company. He had actual employees, actresses that were coming to his room as an actress. And Bill Cosby, most of his cases, he wasn't acting on behalf of an employer. He was just Bill Cosby.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, really good.
One is more workplace related,
gotcha,
and one isn't.
Gotcha. I think that another question that I want to talk about, because and like I said, Natasha and I had a previous conversation on another show, and I just thought it was so important that we continue the conversation. So one of the things that we talked about during that conversation that I certainly want to bring up and delve into even deeper here, Salvador says, like Bill Clinton. Yeah. I don't know. He was inappropriate for sure. I don't know if he was
at work. So.
Yeah, he was inappropriate, but okay. So, but we talked about some of the subtleties of sexual harassment. So let's talk about that. What is one of the biggest, forms of sexual harassment that we may not consider, that we may not just necessarily see it as sexual harassment that you find in your work?
Well, what we are seeing more frequently is harassment through social media. And a lot of people think that workplace sexual harassment only has to take place at the work site during working hours. And now that we have 24-hour access to social media, employers are now responsible for their employees' conduct, even outside of the workplace, even off the clock.
Really?
Really.
I did not know that. That's fascinating.
If I have 2 employees, they work for me, they're both at home in the comfort of their bed in the middle of the night, and I'm constantly getting Facebook messages that are sexual advances, or I'm telling you, look good today, and I'm telling you, I really don't want to talk about this, and you continue on, guess what? That's sexual harassment. And I can walk into work and show those Facebook messages to my employer in the morning, and my employer can fire that person. And I have done it, and I have seen it done time and time again. So please be careful on social media when it deals when it comes to harassment, because just because you're on workplace premises, just because you're not quote unquote on the clock, your employer is still liable for your behavior. And more likely than not, you're not Harvey Weinstein, you're not Bill Cosby or anybody else, and they're going to fire you the next day. So, yep, you're right here.
So let's talk about indirect sexual harassment, because this was really fascinating to me. Explain a little bit about what that is.
So what that means is I can be harassed even if I wasn't the intended person that comments were suggested to. So my scenario I like to give is that every day I'm sitting in the break room as a female. There are men at a whole nother table in the break room, but in earshot are saying inappropriate things. They're looking through on their phone at Instagram photos and talking about women's bodies. Oh, she's flexible. Oh, I saw her at King of Diamonds, and they're talking very explicitly about that woman. I'm just saying, so, did you hear Malia Michaels was a vegan? Look at her body, all of that type of stuff. And you're saying that, and I'm hearing this every break. Although they are not talking to me, they're not talking about me. But because of the explicitness of their language, I can say I was being sexually harassed. And I could be correct in that instance. So don't think just because you're not talking to someone or the conduct wasn't intended to be at you, you can still be on the hook for sexual harassment.
And when you told me that, when we talked about that in that interview, I told you then I have been sexually harassed for 90% of my career.
Yep.
To us, it's just a way of doing business. I mean, it's just a part of I think when you're in the entertainment and you work with majority men, that is just the way it is. Where did you go?
You can't see me?
No, now I can see you. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
It's just a cost of doing business. And I have even said to certain people that I've worked with that I don't want to hear certain things, and I work in the morning. So I don't want to hear these certain things before 6 o'clock in the morning. I can't take it. It's just like assaulting me. And you say it kind of, and I was serious and they knew I was serious, but it never once crossed my mind that would be considered sexual harassment.
Sexual harassment. The moment you told them, so again, sexual harassment is unwelcome conduct. So if I work on a spicy radio show and I'm engaged in that banter or whatever, not harassment. But if I'm saying, look, I don't want to hear this before a certain time, we're not on the air, that's not part of our script, that's not what I signed up for, it doesn't matter what industry. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, that is harassment. And I think that's the problem. That's what we're seeing on the news, is that people think because I'm in the entertainment industry, that I'm automatically exempt from labor and employment laws. We saw it way back when with wage and hour. I don't know if you remember, having these unpaid internships, and, and the Department of Labor said, no, you're a for-profit company. You can't have this type of unpaid internship. So I think, again, they thought they were exempt from that. So now we're seeing it now in this sexual harassment capacity. I mean, even now, even though I've had a few days for that to settle in, that really is mind-boggling to me. So let's talk a little bit, because we have a lot of people, especially on Facebook Live, that are entrepreneurs. They're in their own space. They may have freelancers. They may not necessarily have staff, but they may. And so how does that affect entrepreneurs? Is it exactly the same? Are there nuances? It's a little different. So essentially, if you have freelancers, you're a little bit off the hook. Okay. Right? Because they're not your employees and you're not necessarily responsible for their conduct. But here's the thing. When you have, let's say you have one employee, if that freelancer decides to harass them, then you're kind of on the hook for that. So you have to be careful with dealing with vendors, with freelancers, because there's a very thin line between a freelancer and actually being your employee. No matter how you set up your contract, it's all about the relationship. The courts look beyond the contract and say, well, how did you work in concert with each other? Right. But entrepreneurs, it's all about, you have the opportunity as an entrepreneur to set your own culture for your organization. And no matter who's working for you, you should make it very clear to be associated with me and my company as a freelancer, as a vendor, as whatever. You're a reflection of me, and this is the behavior that I expect. But it's a little bit easier when you are a solo entrepreneur and you employ freelancers.
Wow. Okay. But still, you have to be very, very careful.
You have to be very, very careful.
So what tell us about, because you wrote a book, it's called You Can't Do That at Work, and it's 100 legal mistakes that managers make in the workplace that it not only talks about sexual harassment, but there are other things that you can do that an employee may be experiencing by a manager. Does it matter if it's a manager as opposed to another coworker that may be on the same level? Is it the same?
Doesn't matter. It could be coworker, you can be harassed by a coworker, a customer, a vendor, anyone that you come in contact with in the workplace. Your employer is responsible for them not harassing you. But to the book, the reason I wrote the book was because just being in HR and in legal for many, many years, I noticed that a lot of employees just don't know their rights, right? They come to me as HR, they assume what I say is correct. And like we just said earlier, a lot of times I'm speaking on behalf, protecting the interests of the company. And I think it's important that people know their rights and they know their steps. And in the book, we talk about not only sexual harassment, in the form of racial harassment, age discrimination, gender discrimination. Everyone in the workplace is in what we call a protected class. No matter who you are, you're protected by anti-discrimination laws. And I think it's important that people understand the difference between, okay, I'm being managed by a bully and I'm being harassed and discriminated against. So I talk about that, and the difference between the two. I also talk about taking a leave of absence from work. Every once in a while, you have a serious medical condition or your family, what you can and cannot do when you're on a leave of absence. The recent trend is that employers are firing employees if they are not bedridden when they're on a medical leave of absence, so here's a scenario. You look kind of strange. So I don't know.
Strange. That's surprise, not strange.
So I'm on a leave of absence. I take a picture of myself on the beach. I'm on a medical leave of absence. I take a selfie. I post it on Facebook. All right. My manager might automatically terminate me. Wait a minute. You're on a medical leave of absence, but yeah, you're posting pictures from the beach.
Well, that's just dumb.
Or what if I had foot surgery and I'm recovering from foot surgery? The laws do not say where I can recover, where I have to recover, right? So that's a common mistake that we've seen in the courts, managers and organizations automatically terminating you without finding out, well, why are you on a leave? What does your medical documentation say? My medical I have seen medical documentation come through to say, experiencing a high level of stress of anxiety, and they need to go see their mom in Dominican Republic and spend some time on the beach. If that's what my doctor tells me is going to make me feel better, then I get to do that. So, but there are certain lines. But if your doctor says no, should not be running, then you should not be posting Facebook Live pictures of you running across the beach. You can hold a margarita too.
I'm telling you, sometimes I need a margarita for medicinal,
right? To deal with the stress. So I talk about that, what you can and do when you're on leave. And I really talk a lot about social media, because social media is really causing a lot of problems for both employers and employees. We've seen recently with the NFL, recently filed a labor charge under unfair labor practice for requiring football players to kneel. And that labor charge was that they were engaging in protected concerted activity. Mm-hmm. And protected concerted activity means that a group of employees can get together and they can be disgruntled about their terms and conditions of employment. And employers can't stop you from being disgruntled. So what that means in our context, maybe we're not standing for the national anthem, but I can again get on social media with you. We have the same employer, and I can say, man, I hate my boss. And you can join in and say, yeah, I hate my boss and my company too. Guess what? your employer cannot do anything about that. That is called protected concerted activity.
I'm going to tell you, and I get that. I understand legally, I get that, but it's like for young people. Like I have this discussion with my 24-year-old nephew all the time.
Yeah,
but the things you say on Facebook can really impact your employment. Mm-hmm. And they may not say, "I saw what you said on Facebook, and I'm going to fire you." But something else could happen, and it may be easier for them to let you go because you're airing your, whatever.
And to get future employment.
Or exactly, or future or college. And so even at my son's school, they do social media classes and how to use it appropriately, because they too can be, suspended or something for bullying kids through social media or making sexual kind of, things with social media. And so I'm glad that they're starting to teach kids younger and younger, because I mean, they live on social media. I mean, a lot of us, we didn't grow up with it, and and so what is your advice to parents on what they should say to their children about future college, future employment, that sort of thing? From a legal standpoint, what is your advice?
I mean, I say the same thing to I have a 17-year-old who's on Snapchat, on everything else, and I always say, this never goes away. You think you may be deleting it, but I know as a recruiter and from being all my years in HR, we Google you. When you apply for that job and you're, we're going to Google you. And if you're doing things that are inappropriate on social media, you're saying things, then you're probably going to disqualify yourself from that job. And at this point, that's perfectly legal for me to decide not to hire you because of that. As long as I'm not hiring you because of your protected class, I can say, nope. So I always say, be professional. You never know when an opportunity is going to present itself. You always tell your kids you can be president of the United States one day. And I know that maybe not the case right now, but usually, things like that would stop you saying things on social media, on TV, would stop you from having those type of roles. So be as professional as you can. I'm not saying don't have fun. We realize that times are changing. So the whole rule, it used to be when we were growing up, or when social media first came out, don't be seen with a drink in your hand, or, we don't go that far, to say, well, don't have alcohol in your pictures. But if you're saying disparaging things about others, about other organizations, I'm going to assume you're going to bring that negativity into my organization.
No, absolutely. And I mean, even to take it a step further, because I talk about this as far as media is concerned, or even, as a speaker, event organizers, organizations that are looking to hire you, especially if they're corporate, media companies, if they're looking to put you on their platform, we all Google and we all want to see like what you're talking about. And if anything pops up that, you talking about maybe a potential sponsor or somebody that's bought advertising time, if it's really bad, we may decide not to go with you because we don't want to irritate people that are paying our bills. And so you have to be very, very careful. You will never see me say anything political, period. Because corporate organizations will not hire you to come train or talk at their company and a lot of them, voted for Trump. So you got to be really careful. So you have got to be careful. I mean, I know they say it's social media and we should be social, but it is business.
It's business.
It's business.
And, and I always advise my son, my children, and everybody that I talk to, what is your long-term goal? If you're looking to do the same thing every day and hate your job or do whatever, okay, fine. But you got to look at the big picture. And that means you have to think twice before you say anything that you don't ever want repeated to someone else. And social media is always there and people can dig things up. But I want to bring out a recent case just talking about how an organization, it was a lady who took pregnancy pictures with her husband, and she was topless. You couldn't see anything, but she was the back of her and she was pregnant, and her company fired her and said that those pictures were too explicit and they weren't aligned with the values of that organization, and they could do that legally, so you just have to be very, very careful. Employers can, look at those photos and say, you don't work here anymore because of that. So just always think of your big picture, what's your long-term goal, and every decision that you make is going to impact that girl.
It's interesting because, you know, when I resigned from Tom, I definitely started posting more pictures like of myself and doing different things. And people were like, what happened? And I was like, I don't have anybody scrutinizing my social media now. I mean, they weren't, you know, we're an entertainment company. So obviously they wanted you to be social and they wanted you to grow the brand. But they also wanted to make sure that what you were doing was in alignment, especially if you were, you know, more of a high profile person to the show. They wanted to make sure that what you were doing was in alignment with what they believed as well. And so you always kind of posted with just the thought, like, you know, you got Tom, well, not necessarily, but, you know, the representatives of Tom kind of looking. And so it was always in the back of your head. And so now, because I don't, I feel a little bit more free with what I post, but I'm still very careful about what any potential client, any potential media company that I want to be, you know, associate, all of that, what they would think about this post. And I always have to consider it.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Natasha.
I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. You can pick up the book. You can't do that at work. The link is, let me show you the link again. It's on Amazon. So if you just want to Google, you can also follow Natasha on Twitter at twitter.com/mylifeiswork and get connected with her on LinkedIn. But just some really valuable information. And like I said, I think for me, the biggest takeaway was just as an entrepreneur, you know, and somebody owning my own business, is I hire people and, you know, bring people into the company, like what I have to be careful with. So very valuable information. I appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right, you guys, thanks so much for joining us for Lunch and Conversation. I kind of like that whole tagline. Alfonso, thank you. Doug, Kent, Lexi, I saw you on. Carolyn, thank you guys so much for joining. And we will talk to you soon. We'll have to have Natasha back to talk about some other things.
Oh, yeah, I got a lot to talk about.
It did work. We'll talk to you guys later.